but you're not really sure. Oh, there we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Creators Conclave. It is myself, DBJ, and Darius Jana. And every other Sunday, we get together and talk about things across the pond, bringing up just current events. And of course, we shape everything into RPG related subjects, as well as just talking about RPGs in general, and things actually going on that we're involved in as well. Gotta throw that in there too. As usual, we have a number of subjects. So sorry if you guys were expecting us to be on at the exact time, but don't worry about it. We're here and we're ready to engage. Thanks, Poe, for joining up. Scott Poe says my 3-year-old son is also inexplicably up, so we're practicing saying your name. It's Devabrian Jackson. It's like the it's those round little metal things that shoelaces go through. But whatever, look it up. It's true. I don't know. It's I used to
aren't those plinkles or something stupid like that?
I used to come up with some of the silliest things like Devabrian is like that moisture you get when you put like the little paper things on the toilet and you sit down on it and you get that little moisture layer, and it's like, no, it's called Devabrian. Don't worry about it. It's look it up. It's true.
Devabrian, the greatest of all unknown elements.
Yep. It's
You're the reason that the Devabrian is in fact why cortical stacks exist.
Exactly. It's the thin lubricant that none of us want to touch, but it's absolutely necessary. Fat Ninja DM, which I've got to get in touch with Fat Ninja DM about something as well.
Hello, Mr. Fat Ninja DM. I hope you are doing well.
You can't really put links into the chat, so if you can get on Facebook, PM me, sir or lady or whoever. Just PM me, and then that way you can set up any link or something like that. So don't hesitate. Just send me a direct message. Because if you the chat will just block you out if you try to put in any kind of any information like that. Okay, so more specifically, we will bring up a couple of things we like to talk about currently in current news. So let's kind of summarize some of the things we're going to bring up. For my end, we've had the death of a political figure, and we can talk about how we can use events like that, a framing event essentially, and how we can use a funeral to jumpstart an adventure or even include it into an adventure, that kind of thing. And then as far as the gaming world,
well, we got some stuff to talk about.
I'll talk about some digital tools and some things I've heard.
Yeah, I got some of those as well. A couple that are like through Patreon. So I actually kind of like, that's kind of where I get a lot of my things there. Like Patreon has created a very good not cottage industry, but kind of like a method of really showing like ways of funding people, which just doesn't exist elsewhere. I'm pretty sure Sirenscape would do a lot better if they got a Patreon, but there we go.
I even did a video on it when I ended my video with a rather haphazard and fun and odd look at a Sirenscape because I have it on my phone, and so I decided to live turn on my Sirenscape, the sci-fi and the fantasy one, and show people how it operates, at least from the phone app, and that was hilarious.
Okay.
Which, by the way, Sirenscape has a contract with Wizards of the Coast to do sounds specifically for their Dragon Heist adventure that's coming out soon. And Sirenscape was invited. They had a live stream video. They were invited into the WotC studios and have recorded members of WotC for use in their mods for making the sound mappings for Dragon Heist.
We'll get into it, but yeah, from my side of it, we'll talk a little bit about Games Workshop and what they've been getting up to. But also we can talk. I would like to. I actually think it would be interesting if we talk a bit about prisons and how crime, punishment, and the concept of prisons can be used in role-playing games, which I'm pretty interested in that.
Prisons are like my second favorite. Let's get the game started kind of thing. Love prison, prison escapes, prison breaking.
Ironically, like I don't like some of my best games start in prisons. Like some of the best games that have kind of like people have been like, wow, that was so brilliant. But it's always kind of like, you guys are in prison, and they immediately just go, oh, well, shit, I got nothing to do now. I'm just going to sit in a corner. Okay, like, tell me what's going to happen next. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, Scott Poe brings up Donjon, or Dungeon. DONJON. It's a digital tool system. Yeah, there's a ton of them, man, out there. I brought up Mythweavers and Obsidian Portal. There's of course Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, D&D Beyond. Man, there's a bunch of them, and it's slowly getting to the point where we can have digital tools and use them organically live, like as far as like mapping tools and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so let's start with the funeral. Okay, so in recent days, a senator of ours has passed away, John McCain, and he had been fighting, getting treatment for brain cancer. Decided to curtail his treatment, probably so that he could have a better end of quality of life. And he passed away. Yep. And the biggest thing about the gentleman, and of course, we neither of us are political individuals. I'm talking about just the background and then using it for framing it for a game. So this individual joined the military, was then captured, POW, came back, and then joined public service and became a senator. I'm being very general here. So one thing that often happens around funerals is that funerals are never really about the individual, right? It's normally about all the people still alive at the funeral, as opposed to the individual itself. Despite the fact that people come to give their respects and whatnot. Most notably, what happens in a funeral is everyone wants to know who's there.
Yeah.
And who's come from, if in a medieval setting, like who's come from as far away to this funeral, and what kind of entourage did they bring? Did they come on their own? Were they an enemy of this individual but decided to show their respects? Has someone come to kind of thumb their nose at this individual? The idea of two long lost rivals now have an excuse to be in the same room with each other, and hilarity ensues as they
thumb their nose at each other, or the more better diss, bite their thumb at each other.
Yeah, exactly. And then and then there's of course all of the rumors, right? So the first people show up, and then everyone has the rumors about the people that show up, or assumptions, or that's the long lost daughter. I can't believe she made it here, or something, or that's the bastard son. I'm surprised he's here. He shouldn't be here. Those kind of things.
Well, and the thing of it is that we've talked about other kind of public special events of sorts in the past. Specifically, we talked about marriages. We did the whole Meghan and Harry getting married thing. In that situation, we're talking about a similar thing, but also very, very different, because actually the context is way, way different. The marriage is more of a celebration. It's a thing of, publicly you're kind of showing forward the happiness of this new marriage. It talks about the future and stuff. Funerals are talking about endings. And there is kind of this grand implication to it that there is just this stuff that you can't do at a funeral, which like makes for incredible drama. So, like you were saying about two rivals meeting together at this funeral, they would be in the same room together, such as DeVay and his incredible, awesome cat. But all the same, it doesn't matter. You can kind of sit like you kind of get this idea of like propriety is much more focused upon in this situation, and it kind of like allows you as a game master to construct like encounters that don't necessarily have combat in them. And also because of the social pressure of this is supposed to be a grieving time, you can kind of really like set up the movers and shakers of an area, of a world. And then you can of course do the murder mystery thing of, a dead person never speak ill of the dead, but this dude ain't no saint, like he made mistakes. He's got a bastard son and his daughter won't speak to him. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like when we talked about the marriage before in a funeral, I mean, it's a great way to set up, like you said, all the movers and shakers, and then of course there's going to be a period of time where everyone separates, and then you get all the little rumors, especially when they contradict each other. I'm just, let's say there was this great valiant knight that passed away or something, and there's this great funeral for them, and the whole community comes out for this individual. People come from faraway lands, they arrive. Of course, violence, physical threats and violence are completely unwarranted. Like the first person that does it will, they'll be cast out, they'll be considered. It's such a faux pas to even get into a physical altercations unless it's maybe a little bit of rough housing beyond that, to just have such a loss of face and to be considered the enemy of everyone there. And even there might even be individuals who want to push buttons to make someone else act out so that all others will turn against them. But in those cases, of course, it's a great way to spread rumors to the player characters, to say, one little group, there's gossiping individuals, and they're like, oh, did you hear about his bastard son? And then someone else talks about something completely different, and like, oh, he was part of the battle of so and so, and never took credit for it. He just showed up and left, and what an honorable man. And then the other person's like, I hated that dude, and then giving out those not necessarily lies, but images of this individual from different points of view. You can also drop those little adventure seeds about missions that were never completed, and belongings that were never picked up, and family members that were never met, and lands that he's going to that it's important for someone to carry on the legacy. Funerals are really great for doing that. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of the big. I mean, that like at the same time, that is kind of the big reason why you would do a funeral. But also, there's another side to it, which is that's what you're talking about right now is like the beginning point of a campaign, or the midpoint of a campaign. It's kind of like it's a public event. It's not really that big of a deal. You may not have that big of an effect, a big of a relationship with them. But there's also the more cogent, more powerful thing of, generally speaking, we're talking, at least insofar as like escapist fantasy stuff. Science fiction, you got a much wider thing. It's a bit of a different kettle of fish when it comes to funerals. But when you're talking about fantasy, you're talking about movers, and your players are generally the movers and shakers of the world, and they will come into contact with kings and dignitaries and these kind of people. And it could just be actually an ending point for a campaign, or a midpoint for a campaign, where the friend, the ally of the party, has passed. And it can be all kinds of different things. It can be all kinds of pathos, all kinds of big problems that arise as a result. And it basically becomes this point where the party who, like, the way we're describing it is, oh, the party are just hobnobbing. They are in the area and in the situation surrounds them. But you could just as easily flip it and make them kind of the center of the circumstance, and it would be like, I mean, we were talking about a senator, Senator McCain, but like, imagine if like a member of the ruling council died, and they died with these people close by. It becomes like this big thing where the political landscape, which generally doesn't give a crap about the party, they're just kind of like, oh, you're over there and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, because this dude died and they were present, everybody is now, boom, we're paying attention to you. And then it becomes that the rivalries that this senator may have, by extension, get extended onto the party. By the method of death makes some people really like them, because it'll be like, oh, you've killed my enemy, or oh, you've immortalized them. And then they'll make enemies. It'd be like, you killed them. You killed this person. You killed my friend. Like, I'm not helping you. Fuck you. You killed my friend. Like, all of this stuff can come in.
Yeah, Caius brings up a great one. So he talks about PC funerals are great to finish a storyline, finish worth something more than a bad dice roll, and allow other players to take the floor, and then you can stir up things for the future. Very rarely, although it's a very powerful tool to have a funeral for a PC. Even if it's no more than they're on an adventure path and you have the little mounded rocks and someone makes a little small stick of a monument at the headstone or something like that. Like, that's a very classic Western style funeral where you could have the players around and a few NPCs, and then each person can kind of say something, or even like a little mental or like reflection or a soliloquy or whatever. But even if that person is returned back to the community and passes away, a PC could have a legacy far beyond, like Kaya says, like a bad die roll and then the character's dead. If the community misses that individual, or even if the players, what could even be kind of strange is the player characters don't react strongly, but the community does. And they end up having this like memorial when the PCs get back from their adventure. They're like, oh, so-and-so died. But the community's like, what? Who?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. And tell us everything. And that could be a great way for even the player whose character died to be like, wow, I didn't realize my character had that, impact.
It's actually really funny you say that, because I was thinking of it in terms of like, bigwig political levels. But if we want to talk about the lower level, like just straight up, your character died because the numbers came up that way. I actually have something that's very prescient and very like occurring now. About 2 months ago, one of the players, their character died, and it wasn't to do with anything particular. It was just the numbers fell out that way, and basically it had a big effect on the party. And like, I'm all about interpersonal relationships and stuff like that, so I really did like het on to how is the fact that you, like, if things could have been different, this person could still be alive. How are you dealing with this? Like, how are you think? And they're kind of going to go through their own things. But then there's another thing to it, which was this character was being not hunted, but followed by an NPC. And we had established that beforehand and things like that. And they met, like, just because I wanted to make it very dramatic, they met this person. But because they never actually properly talked about it, of being, oh, I know this woman. This is the woman. And it's like, and then they could talk. And it basically turned into this person that they met, this NPC. They basically they didn't abandon her as such, but they did abandon her in an old barn. And it's going to be like a thing, it's going to be a thing that's obviously going to come up. This person had family. This person had people who they cared about. And that's going to be another thing that's going to really be important for you to consider in your campaign when you're using death, which is, even though narratively it could result in like, this is the end point of the character, they're dying in this big, awesome way. You know, we're talking about like Supergirl, you know, Supergirl from Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, she dies in the greatest, most incredible way possible. But you're also dealing with the fact that death is an ending, and it's very, very jagged the way that ending occurs. We're talking about relationships that could be resolved, that aren't, lovers that are, you know, that can have all kinds of different perspectives. You know, people have different opinions on this character, and players will be affected. You know, people like outside the game will be affected by that death, and you're then going to have to carry that forward in a way that is both kind of like loving and respectful, and yet also fun, which is actually very, very difficult. It's so difficult, in fact, that some games, like perfectly rightly, just say no death, no character death. The people who die don't matter. Kings, that kind of thing. We're not going to deal with killing someone that you're invested in. You know, like people do, groups do say that.
That does bring up, and I'm not going to go into this too much, but that does bring up a thing. There's they call it the X card now, but it's been called many things, where you have something in the game that can be quite emotional or triggering for various individuals. And sometimes I think people consider it to be like, you know, I don't need an X card because I'm not offended by anything. But sometimes things are going on in our lives, and so you could be triggered by something temporarily, especially if you had like the loss of some, even like the loss of a pet or something. You get into a game and then there's a funeral. You might be affected by it and not really know it. So it'll speak up and just say, "Hey guys, could we fade this to black just a little, you know, bit, because I'm really feeling something." Or even if you start the game out and go, "Guys, you know, I've been going through a little issue here. Could we just stay away from this particular subject?" But something that was being brought up in the chat, from like vampires and liches to speak with the dead, resurrection stuff, dealing in a world where the division between life and death can be kind of fluid, can also create dramatic moments as opposed to just considering them to be problems. For example, even with the ability to speak with the dead or commune or bring back the dead in some kind of manner, it could be that these cultures may not feel that those abilities are reliable. So, for example, the words and feelings and emotions of the dead may not be taken as true fact, right? So you could have maybe a smaller pagan part of the community that has the ability to speak with the dead or bring back ghosts, or you know, has some kind of relationship with like ghouls or vampires or the undead of some sort. And those that are living are like, look, that person may be talking like the person I remember and they're acting like the person I remember, but that person is not my dead loved one. I don't care how convincing you think they are to you. I don't care how convincing you're making them be. I don't believe that that is truly them. Even if they truly are a ghost and it's like, could you please solve my murder? Like, you know, it could be a cultural thing where like, no, resurrection, sure, you can bring somebody back from the dead, but really they're just a doppelganger of the person that has already passed on.
That is really that's actually really prescient. That's actually really, like, you're really speaking to me, mate, because actually this is kind of where we can segue from more of the escapist side of it into sci-fi, because sci-fi deals a lot with the concept of resurrection and whether or not you are you are actually coming back to life, and whether or not you would want to. Like, that's a big thing. It's in Shadowrun, it's in Cyberpunk, and it's in the great and loving Eclipse phase. The concept of morph death, or real or true death, or sleeve death, meat flesh death. There's lots of different words for it, but it's actually kind of a thing, or it's actually very cool that the inimitable Caius of Glantry was bringing up about resurrection. There could be worlds where resurrections exist, but in a will, you can write whether or not you actually want it to be attempted on you. And in Eclipse phase, like, we'll talk about Eclipse phase because that's really that's the big one. You can there's like this system, and anybody who knows about it, I'm just going to go over it quickly. Basically, there's this object. It's put into your head when you are born. It's called a cortical stack. It's supposed to be part of you for the entirety of your lifespan. It's like just for the entirety of it. Its specific job is to just record everything you do, everything you think, everything you ostensibly are on like a mental level, and records it and then sends it up to a cloud. This cloud then, when your body, for instance, dies, or if you're unhappy with it or gets too old or something, you can then kill or stop using this body and download yourself into a clone, or download yourself into a robot, or download yourself into a nanite cloud if you really want to. I mean, in Eclipse phase, you shouldn't do that because that's death. But, it's kind of like, you can do that. But there becomes this big old thing of, like, in Eclipse phase, I believe they're called superiors, where they basically say, you only get one life. You should not have more than one life. You can transfer yourself from sleeve to sleeve, but if you need to keep all your sleeves alive, basically, you can't let them die. And this kind of comes to a religious point of, like, these kind of things. And as a result, I'm watching a TV show. I was actually watching it before we started. It's called Altered Carbon. It's a Netflix show. And in it, like general rule of thumb, guys, if you guys want to play a game of Eclipse phase or Shadowrun, watch this and basically do what they're doing here, because it's got a lot of things in it, which I'm pretty sure they have to have taken some of the ideas from Eclipse phase. They have to have like bought some of the rights or something, because they're using basically all the terminology. In this, there is a group of people called Neo-Cs, Neo-Catholics. Yeah? And Neo-Catholics have taken kind of the Jehovah's Witness idea of not accepting blood transfusions or organ transplants, because they believe that the body should remain like a sacred temple. And basically, if you say, I am a neo-Catholic, you do not want to be, that's basically saying, legally speaking, you cannot bring me back to life. And this has all kinds of like ramifications and effects and stuff like that. There are, conservative groups. There are like radical groups. We're not going to call them conservative groups, but they are radical groups which basically pay people to convert, and then they basically use them as kind of like basically flesh slaves. And they can then go to their grave and they never get brought back to life, so they can never testify against these people. You can get all of this stuff, all of it like melded into itself, like really kind of like making it into this kind of subject of, should resurrection be used? I mean, that doesn't really mean that you can't use it in fantasy settings. One of my favorite stories that I've ever heard someone say about like another game was a video game pundit, Jim Sterling, who talked about one time he's been playing the same game for like decades at this point. He's been playing it for ages. But he said at one point, my character lost a foot, lost an arm, bled out, and died. So the party decided, because I was the only one they liked, to bring me back. They tried to bring me back, and then I just and they spent they spent the diamond, they spent the thing, and then I just said, no, I don't want to come back to life because life is too horrible. And it just made sense for him, and I just like that. I just really like that. Yeah.
Me too. I mean, we often we as the people outside of the game often look at, oh well, these are the gaming statistics and this is very easy. My character finally has resurrection spell or any number of the spell like effects in like 5th edition or any of the D&D derivatives or whatever. Like, oh, this is easy. But the cultural impact of it, we tend to gloss over, or at least assume that because the player characters have access to it, the rest of the world must have access to it. And we can really add a lot of drama in when the culture that they are part of, and it could change based on whether they're in a mountainous area or they travel 500 miles and people think differently about its use. So the players might think, oh, well, this is let's get the diamond. Let's, resurrect the person. No big deal. But the community itself or the individual you're bringing back, it's like, no, please don't bring me back. Imagine this, I don't know, famous knight is killed. They have this big funeral and the players are like, hey, I could solve this situation in 10 minutes. Where's my diamond at? And wants to bring the person back and have this person rise out from this coffin and everyone's like, what the hell? I mean,
the other one is Speak with Dead, which is a very old spell which people use all the like it's the great killer of everything, because you kind of go, oh, who killed this dude? Let's ask him.
Well, I read a book series. I think it was like a young adult series or something. But anyway, I needed a book series of books to read, and in the book it was modern day, but all of your various tropes existed, like vampires and werewolves and things like that, and the undead. And by law, in this world, there was a character who was like a detective, mystic detective of sorts, and people who died did not have legal ownership of all their living things. And this woman's job was that she would investigate people's deaths because you could talk to their spirits. Like, hey, this person killed me. Could you please arrest this person? But by law, the person that was dead did not have the legal right to speak on their own behalf, because it was considered tainted knowledge, mainly possibly by the person who tries to speak with you. It's like going to a spirit medium. Who's to say the spirit medium tells the truth, right? They can just go, yeah, I spoke to the corpse and the corpse said, and then of course they don't give away the fact that, hey, they learned where their money is at and their property. Decent, they could keep those things. So, but a strange thing in this world was like vampires were considered undead. Therefore, they had no rights to their living possessions. So they had to use mortal humans to possess the things that they used to own when they were alive, as agents and such. So my point being is that despite the fact that there are ways to basically circumvent dying, it doesn't mean that the culture that you're in agrees with your methods of doing so. It doesn't matter that you are a ghost and you're pleading for someone to find out who killed you. Maybe you're being deceptive, or maybe there's some kind of method of like deceiving people, especially if you have individuals who are trying to take advantage of that fact. And there could be a ghost that's like, no, someone's using my image. They're it's not the real knight. There's someone like using an illusion.
Using my EIP.
Yep, exactly.
No, like that, like the thing that we're ultimately coming to, about this concept, about the idea of death, resurrection, the rights of it, and these kind of things, is we're basically bringing up that it is a breeding ground for thoughts and campaigns and things like that. I mean, I have seen and played in games where the point of bringing someone back to life was literally the point of it, Books exist where like the beginning point of it is dude being dead for 10,000 years, bring him back to life, and he's going like, yo, why am I awake? You know, should be dead. What's up? And then you go from there. And that's the kind of like, it's a very fertile ground for that kind of thought process. The thing of it though is that we have to, you know, you have to be a bit careful. It's kind of like you have to be very like secure, like not circuitous, but just be a bit more tactful with the way you do it, because like we were talking about before, the X card, the trigger warning kind of idea. We're dealing with like ultimately you're dealing with human pain. That's kind of the thing. And if you are too good at depicting human pain, you could wind up with people getting het up about it. And I'm not saying that as a kind of thing of like, oh, this could happen. This has happened. It's happened to me where a party member died and I got so het up about it that in the middle of the session I burst into tears, just because the way that it was all going, it was too much. Like recently, what I was saying about my party member who passed away, you know, my player character who passed away. The person who was like the character said, I need to take a second. And we took a break. We took a half an hour break afterwards, because like you're dealing with some heavy stuff. We were dealing with death, you know. Resurrection simultaneously allows that person to return, but also does to a certain degree make its own trauma of irrelevating the pain that that person felt. So the point is that, you know, we're giving you ideas, we're giving you systems. Like, think about it, consider what we're going with. And that's kind of like, I think that's the big ethos of what we're saying right now. Yeah. Use death sparingly.
Yeah, Scott Poe and Red Dice in the chat. By the way, everyone subscribe to Red Dice Diaries. He has also got a blog too that he posts a lot of things on. Anyway, the idea that someone that dies or is killed, the murder mystery of the speak with dead kind of thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that that individual has perfect recollection of the events, or the recollection of the events are from their point of view. So like Red Dice says, you know, hey, if they wore a mask, they don't know who the killer is. They saw a mask. Or if it's a ghostly spirit, they may perceive things through the trauma, not necessarily through the real events. So a killer may appear as like a demon to them because the trauma shaped the encounter to make them feel like this person that was like Jack the Ripper had like horns and came out of the shadows and had a 5-foot blade or something, because their mind registered the emotional impact of being killed rather than the true events of being killed.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, imagine, like, this is fucking gruesome. Imagine you have to investigate like a child's murder. And it's like like children. I mean, like, I'm not going to sit there and say children are very not very reliable in relation to these kind of things. But the way they perceive the world can sometimes be almost like metaphorical. It's like, so who killed you, kid? And it'd be like a giant. And it's like, no, it's not actually a giant. It's because a kid sees the world by looking up. They killed me with like a mirror. It's like, well, no, they didn't actually kill them with a mirror. They killed them with something that was reflective. You know, it's kind of like there's a big bit of metaphor to that.
Also, I want to go back to something Scott Poe said about vampires and liches. This is a great way to turn. Let's say someone passes that's very like known to be very honorable and noble, supported the community, is looked at as a pillar of, you know, truth and justice or something in the community. If there could be people whose intentions are good, but the way they're going about it is bad, by trying to bring this person back through illicit means, by you know, like a warlock patron, or bringing them back from, you know, vampiric abilities, or bringing them back, you know, as with the power of like like a mummy or something, or what have you. And in that way, this person, they may want to bring this person back so that this person could continue their mission. But now that they are tainted by this evil. And it could be that maybe they go back to their mission and they're really good, but they're undead. Or it could be that their mission is tainted and they go on this murderous rampage to defend the community. And now the PCs have to then stop this individual, but the community may not want this. You know what I mean? There could be this emotional tug of war, because now this person didn't just pass away. Now you've got to go back out and kill this person again, and you bring up all the trauma of having to go through that whole process all over again.
Oh yeah. Like you can also, like, we can talk about all the different ways that this can be. It's like really, really awesome stuff. The one that I think is most interesting is what's its name? I think it's the Wheel of Time. It's called Robert Jordan. There's this, like, in that world, right? There's this thing called the El Shaddai. There's the Wheel of Time, which is this giant. This is like, I mean, technically it's a literal wheel, but it's actually a karmic wheel. It exists, but it doesn't exist. It's just this thing that causes the world to live in cycles, and like, some people have memory of the previous cycles, of the previous turns of the wheel. I mean, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to sit there and go, "Oh no, you got that wrong, Laith." I haven't read all the books. Like, it's a fucking lifetime of work. But anyway, there are some people who remember the turns of the wheel, and in fact, one of the big bad guys is somebody who just remember, like, their whole thing is they remember all their lives. They remember all the turns of the wheel, and as a result, their sense of morality and their sense of perspective is just completely skewed. And to a certain degree, that's technically what a lich is. My mirror fell off the table for no particular reason.
Right.
I don't know why. Anyway, so yeah, you could just kind of have this thing of like a brilliant player, a brilliant way of kind of not explaining, but, you know, putting a twist on the idea of resurrection and stuff, is the act of bringing someone back to life. Just the experience changes their perspective so big that it could be like an alignment shift. It could be they, you know, not only do they, like, in a mechanical sense, not only do they lose levels, but they also have a mechanical, like, alignment shift. They can no longer worship true good gods or something like that. You know, it's kind of like you could have this thing of their perspective is shifted, changed.
Frame Shift was talking about someone who is attacked, and, you know, he says, like, I never knew a person could be consumed with hate. It's all I could sense. The only thing present was the hate. And their impression of what happened to them could be very much skewed, or even the idea of using speak with the dead for someone that has passed, and the person that's dead lies to frame someone else, or to continue their agenda even after death, which would be a very strange thing for someone who has died, you know, because in our legal system there is something, and I'm going to hack this apart. In our legal system, there's something about where you say something at the point of death, and it's taken as fact. So it's like someone who is about to die says something on their deathbed, whether it's from criminal or they're in a hospital, and then that's used as, it is often considered a more true statement than one that is coaxed out of someone through threats or intimidation. But in a world where you can commune with the dead or bring back people from the dead, or there's another world to go to, there's nothing stopping the person who has died to continue whatever mission or agenda, or to support their family or something. I'm just making an example. Someone says speak with the dead let's say this knight dies. Someone speaks with the dead, and they say, "Well, where is your ancient sword and your great treasure that you've gotten?" This knight could lie about it and go, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't remember. Don't know what you're talking about," because maybe they intend for their family to find it, or they intend for someone noble to go after it, or they're afraid for that information to fall into the wrong hands, even after death. So, which in itself, an unreliable dead witness doing it on purpose might be a strange thing as well. Yeah, man. Even Red Dice talks about the possibility that someone could be trying to deliberately frame someone else. Maybe someone takes the information and twists it around so that they can use it for their own political reasons. There's a big funeral, and then they point to multiple individuals like it's your fault this person died, and then now you have the machinations amongst the living, while the person who's dead is like, "No, that's not what I meant." Like, that's and so you could have really complicated, like, "Hey guys, the person who's dead is saying this isn't real," and all the living people are like, "No, we're involved in a certain thing. You do what you want to do. We've got to make sure that we still have political power amongst the living."
Yeah, like there's a certain amount of like this is all talking about drama, the drama of like this, of should you bring someone back to life, should you use their communication. Like one of the best ones that I can think that I could probably think of, like that would be prescient, that would be present for now, is I suppose you could, it's I think it's called the Versailles Amnesty or something like that. Basically, during the First World War, the guns were seen as a war crime. They were called trench guns, and because you had a lot of people quashed together in this kind of thing, you just had to stand at the end of a trench with a shotgun, and just literally they fall over like pins. It's really, really big. After the end of the First World War, there was a generalized amnesty, and they basically said, because so many bad things were happening, people were using like chlorine gas, people were using shrapnel bombs, hollow points. Basically the First World War was an act of fucking terror on the human race. They just kind of said, look, outside of these specific rulings of like, unless you can prove that basically you were being incredibly cruel with their actions, we're generally not going to try and actively indict like specific people for their action, for using these weapons. We're going to have the countries pay reparations, but we're not going to look at specific people. But now now think of the story of try to discover who killed this specific person. And then it becomes, oh, I was killed by a trench gun in 1917. But that doesn't really tell you anything. There's no way to get justice for that person because there's a generalized amnesty. Similarly, like playing that back, because my mind is kind of like doing this in reverse. Discover how this person who died of bad means, it's not like they died of like it was okay at the time or anything. At the time, people were saying, no, the use of trench guns is awful. Don't do it. But because now we're just kind of saying, we're letting bygones be bygones. How do you get justice for an unquiet spirit like that?
Yeah. Segue. An excellent game never played is Wraith the Oblivion. The original.
Oh God.
White Wolf. Okay, relax.
Geist as well, man. Geist is my jam.
Coming back from the dead. Those. I think they even had a medium book called The Risen, where you could play like a character like the Crow, where your animating spirit was in like inside of another animal. But what a great! It was a dark and depressing game, I felt it had a little more hope in it than most people could recognize. But yeah, Wraith is a great game. And the Great War, Red Dice brings up along with the supplement, the Great War. It is an awesome setting. Very much like Eclipse Phase, you really have to lay down what you want to get out of a role-playing game. It's not a murder hobo game, because you play the dead, so you can't, you have no belongings. You have to make a character that actually has a life to them. And the way that they shape the game, where you have fetters and emotions attached to them, so you have these physical things in life that your PC is attached to, and that's where you draw your power from. And then you have emotions that are attached to it. So you could be attached to an individual, or a long lost item, or a location, and you would quote unquote sleep in these locations, and life would continue on even though you are attached to a particular location. So you could be attached to an abandoned house, but the community starts to change around the abandoned house. You maybe drug users come into your abandoned house, and you're just like, get out! Like, this is my house I grew up in. Please get out! And those kind of things. And what a great concept for a game. Very heady. I would have loved to really get involved in a Wraith game. I ran a game where the game starts out where all the PCs are at a murder scene, and the young lady that's killed gets up, and she's the NPC, and she's like panicked and doesn't know what to do, and they have to help her find who killed her. And so the PCs run around with trying to follow the police as they do this murder investigation and stuff. It's pretty cool.
No, like I like that idea. I do, and like that idea of having the person present, and I mean, like, I'm just thinking about it in terms of like constructing a campaign, constructing like an encounter or an adventure. Yeah. And because of the amnesty idea just kind of continues on. What if, like, oh God, my mind goes weird. What if a dude from a mass grave, what if someone who was killed in a war crime and was buried in a mass grave digs themselves up hundreds of years later and goes, I want justice though. Like, just imagine the ins and outs of just that setup. It's similar to your idea of what you had of, you said it was high intelligent monsters, I believe, bringing people who were bringing the bodies of people who were killed, and they were like, we want reparation for the war crime that was just committed on us. It's that kind of idea. It's like how, like, it's asking for like a societal norm to be applied to something that isn't generally a societal norm. And that's kind of where the adventure side of it, that's where the setup side of it plays into it. What if the king comes back to life and he's like, nah, I don't want to be a king no more. Fuck this shit. I want to be a fucking cabbage farmer.
Yeah. I just want to point out, someone's in the chat, the forums, probably saw me on WSD 20's channel. The Creators Conclave, we talk about pretty much whatever we want, but this particular one, I bring up a subject, and Lath brings up a subject, and we just move on. We were really just talking about funerals and the idea of have this amnesty versus justice, whatnot. I love that idea that, like, how do you get justice for this individual? How do you, that's usually the motivating force between, like, the undead, like they have this unfinished life, and unfortunately everyone that caused this unfinished life is gone after tens or even hundreds of years. And so now that they're like looking for something they could never find. But it would be interesting if there kind of is a way to find it. Maybe there are individuals who are living off of I'm just saying, like a person owns a piece of property and their rival comes and kills them, and then the rival that killed them, their family now lives on this property.
What is it? It's like a trope in American like horror, like ancient Indian burial ground or something like that. Yeah. Well, that like just using like Native American, just use the First Nation as an example. You know, a large amount of America is built on like war crime and like killing of these people. Well, what if one of them comes back? One of them comes back and is just like, "Yo, I want my land back." Industrialists and millionaires and stuff like that, they're built on not the generational, but just like the fact that there was this event that happened, and then afterwards lots and lots of people made a lot of money out of like just basic land. It's like that is big. That is a big thing. You can talk about like modern day reparation systems, these kind of things, all kind of plays out.
To talk about another thing that's happened rather recently here in the United States, and I don't want to offend indigenous peoples if they don't want to be called indigenous peoples, but indigenous people, Native Americans, Indian tribes, what have you, an oil company wanted to put a pipeline in North Dakota through tribal lands. And it was like, the people were just going, wait a minute. Okay, listen, we're already being segmented off into a particular location, and you're already not paying attention to our plight. And now you want to dig this giant trench. It's going to spill oil and all this kind of business through our land, go around it. Right. So the media for a long time did not put this on the air at all until it just became too much. Once they did, they showed like aerial pictures of the territory. And of course, you had your big city on one side, you've got, corporate areas on the other side, and then here you have this big giant reservation. And which path did they choose? "Quote unquote," the path of least resistance through their their property. And it's like, you could have a situation where in a more of a fantasy or even like sci-fi setting where, for example, let's go sci-fi. Colonists have lived on this planet. They're starting to spread out. They start digging further and further. And then the alien intelligences or people that live there are like, oh, wait a minute. You're disturbing burial grounds. And the people live there like, we've been here for 10 generations. What burial grounds? I never heard of any burial grounds, and it could just be a lack of knowledge, or the original people that you're offending have left for whatever reason, or there could be some corporate entity that's like, please don't say anything. This is going to cost us money and time and energy.
There's also just the cultural. It could just also be cultural. Like lots and lots of the sad things that happen in the world are just as a result of people on a cultural level not understanding that different cultures will have different bases, and as a result you should have a certain respect for the different cultures. The one that really comes to mind is the concept of what was it called? It was like early shogunate Japan. It was like in Japan, there was this time when they were isolationist. They were very isolationist, and as a result, they had this really big stratification. There were people who were seen as, they were like a lower caste of people. They were called untouchables. They were seen, generally speaking, they were Christian, like they converted to Christianity. And there's some question as to whether or not they were because of their conversion, they are untouchable, or maybe doesn't really matter. Yeah. The ultimate point of that was that if a untouchable touched certain products, you cannot touch that product anymore. So if they touched a plate, they're no longer a thing. If they did this, along comes the Americans with their black ships, forcing open the ports of Meiji era Japan, kind of breaking the embargo by force. And they come in and they're touching meat, and they're touching hand, they're touching everything. You know, they're just touching whatever they want. They've got no thing, and then it's basically like this big cultural problem. Similarly, people got big cultural hang-ups about death. You know, you can't touch a dead body. That's a well-known hang-up. Well, you have to touch a body to bring them back to life. You know, it's kind of like this big thing that comes on. I'm just kind of babbling at this point, aren't I?
No. There's Caius brings up the idea, the moral quandary of the innocents who live off the crimes of their ancestors. It's the people who someone commits a heinous crime, and then for whatever reason, and then you have the individuals living off of the what we would assume the end result of that crime, and then their actions afterwards, whether they knew it or not. If they don't know it, most of us would assume that, well, look, ignorance, you can't really accuse someone if they're ignorant of what's going on. But let's presume that the people who the generations afterwards are completely aware of the crime, but they continue to live off of the fruits of that crime. Now you could make the claim that the people who lived off let's go back to this let's say you go to the funeral and there's this noble knight, but in the past, let's say the knight comes from a long lineage of knights, and the original knight literally slaughtered babies and children and pregnant ladies or something, like the enemy, whether it's, you know, it's the orcs and hobgoblins and whatnot in the you know, the borderlands, and they kill them all, and then this place becomes the new haven. Land is peaceful, there's a food aplenty, you know, what have you. And then all the previous knights knew about this crime. They knew that this individual, that their ancestor did this to create what today is peace and prosperity. And so, you know, currently maybe the knight dies, and now the knight has died and has this guilt, like, well, we have peace and prosperity today, but how do I make amends for what my ancestor did, right? They could be feeling the guilt, and so maybe speaking to the spirit, everyone's like, oh, this person was so noble, and the knight's like, no, we weren't. We were living a lie. Like, could someone, you know, maybe their spirit is unsettled. It's like, you know what, I can't settle until I make these reparations. And the community may not want those reparations made. Like, we've been living under peace and prosperity. You're going to throw us into chaos if you invite the orc hordes back to live on their land again or something. Scott Poe talked about the pipeline, and if I'm reading correctly, the pipeline, they sent out militarized police with dogs and everything to move the people that lived on the reservation away so they could continue the pipeline. When they changed the path of the pipeline to another community, instead they just used like the court system to figure out where the pipeline should be and to fight it in the court system and stuff. So you could have you could create a lot of drama in your game where after someone dies, there's an imbalance in how the people are get reparations for someone dying. So, for example, let's say there are two individuals or two factions that have equal claim to someone's legacy, and maybe the PCs are like, why is everyone so hard against one faction and not the other? They seem to have equal claim. Why isn't it split down the middle? And there could be there could be ancient animosities. There could be a fear that one side, if they're given too much power, may overtake the other side. And then this becomes like more of a mystery, uncovering the backdrop of why these, say, two individuals who both have equal claim are not being treated equally to obtain that claim.
Now, I think we should move on because I feel like we've probably gone round and round a couple of times about it. But this is the way of it. This is the way things go. The forms, Mr. The Forms, Mrs. The Forms, Sir, Madam. We should talk, I think, about the next subject. Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So this is going to be about prisons. So this comes from this like brand new thing. It's in the long line of like of my ongoing series called "My Country is a Shithole and is Slowly Falling into the Ocean." This is from the BBC News. It's kind of the thing. Basically, prison in my place, prison in my country in England has a drug problem, and basically it's because of the prison guards. There's been a large number of prison staffers who have basically been smuggling drugs in to sell to inmates. And like we can really talk about this. We can talk about the ins and outs of all this stuff but we'll ultimately talk about the ins and outs of actually how to deal with prisons, how prisons are, and actually what kind of commentary you're bringing by making certain decisions in your prisons, right? So, talking in terms of like escapist fantasy, Adventureland fantasy, generally speaking, prisons are dungeons. That like they are the dungeons of your castle or whatever you would want to call it. And it's very easy to think of, like the prison as being like this thing. It's a wide cell. There's bars on one side. There's a window, like that kind of archetypical idea of what a cell is. If we want to talk about the real world thing of what a cell looks like, imagine that, but about a tenth the size. It's about, it would be generally like 4 feet by 4 feet. You can't sit up. You're generally not fed a lot. People who go to prison generally come out with, like malnutrition and disease. All kinds of things come in to, like, if we just wanted to say, hey, this is a medieval prison, it's basically a death sentence for most people who go to prison. Like, if you stay there for any length of time, you're dead. But prisons are also a good way to start a campaign because it's the way that you can like cut. You basically like constrain the players. You're starting them in a small, literally enclosed space where you are like imposing a certain amount of authority on top of them, forcing them to behave. And this kind of like can go to all kinds of things. You can go for the Elder Scrolls video games way of, no, shit goes wrong and basically people have to run away, and basically it's a prison break that's happening while all this crazy stuff is happening. You could just say, let's organize the prison break, and it's actually going to be, hey, there's like, it's as a result of the players basically coming together and like basically helping each other escape, and that's how they become the party. You could conscript them, you can put them in the army, you can do all kinds of different things. And somebody's saying crazy things in the thing. Venger from the D&D cartoon had a sweet badass prison that keeps floating over an abyss filled with a fiend folio of prisoners. I mean, dude, you got to admit, that was a sweet ass prison. Not a prison you'd want to go to. Like, try running from that. Yeah, so it's kind of like, yet again, that depicts actually a certain amount about Venger as a character. And it depicts also like how prisons exist. This Dungeons and Dragons cartoon is a magical world full of magical things, and it's really, really high magic and things like that. So probably the only way to keep somebody in prison is to hang them over an endless abyss of monsters, Like, that's the only way to keep them there. Otherwise, they'll just break the door down and walk out, like that's kind of... That's a really good thing. Similarly, how do you feel like, this is going to be a thing. How do you feel about the good country of the world having a gulag or having a prison camp? Because gulags and prison camps are basically glorified concentration camps. They're all about like keeping people in a very, very concentrated area, and they just can't leave.
Well, here in the States, we have an exceptionally robust
yeah, that's a word. That's a word that I use every now and then.
With prisons. Yeah, we've got. Let's see. We've interred Japanese. We've had the Japanese internment camps. We love those. We have Guantanamo Bay, which is like hell. We rent other people's countries to inter people in. Turkey is one of them, because so that we can keep our hands clean. It's just I think prisons are a great way to like to yin yang your setting. And here's what I mean. You could have the good people, the just, the upright country could have these completely brutal, just disgustingly lethal prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine contrasting that to your evil horde, your monstrous realm, and imagine if their prisons are rather mundane, they're rather benign. Imagine if they treat their prisoners very humanely, in the hopes of convincing them to be on their side, on their monstrous horde. And they go, no, you're going to get great meals. We're not going to beat you. We're going to give you things to read and exercise. Here, we're even going to give you little practice weapons to practice with, just so you get some feel like you have something to do during the day. And you're not sleeping well? Here's another pillow. And that would be very interesting to have. Like the good guys are just pissed off, like they've murdered our people so much, and they throw these people away, lock the key, dump waste and food waste to a hole, and just say, we're just gonna psychologically like beat you down. And then the evil ones are like, no, we're going to recruit you to our side. If we capture you, we're not going to harm you. We're not even going to raise our voices. We understand you're upset. That's all right. Let it out. There you go. Let it out. Here's a iced cappuccino for you if you prefer. Here's a moist towelette if you need one. It's like
the bad guys. The bad guys are the hipster of the fantasy world.
Yep. But for like evil fiends, they might do that. I could see these evil, monstrous, demonic fiends going like, yeah, we're going to. We are of such chaos. We're going to do the exact opposite of our enemy, and just prove to you how much better it would be to fight on our side, to support our causes, because we're not that bad. I would love to do something like that.
Like ironically, like bringing that up, there is a genre of fiction which is it is like pulp fiction, like trashy stuff. It comes from Japan. It's called light novels, right? And they basically try desperately to be the bad guy and yet be the best bad guy in the world. And as a result, they do shit like that. They like imprison people and they just give them cappuccinos and nice things, and they're just kind of like, hey, fight on my side. And then the other guys are like, yep, that's a good idea. Let's do this. And it's like, dude, the guy's a lich. He like eats people. Stop it. And we've got an interesting bit of shall we say, like what I was putting for what? Oh man, red dice, dude.
Yeah, I know.
I thought we were bros, dude. Red Dice Diaries says, I think that the concept of the use of good, like good countries, upright countries, countries of justice, using prison systems, those kind of things, that's what it means. That it raises a serious issue of when the good kingdom attempts to remain pure by outsourcing the problems to others or sweeping undesirables under the gulag carpet, as he describes it. It is done ostensibly to protect the majority. And that actually brings up the idea of why prisons exist. Prisons exist because there is a clear and in theory, yeah, there is a clear and present danger brought by this individual on the larger society. If you're a killer, you're clearly a killer who's going to kill again. If you are a rapist, yet again, you're clearly somebody who's not going to change by just leaving you in the society. Thieves, that's kind of a bit more shaky because but especially political dissidents, they disagree with how the country is run. So how you deal with them and how you deal with them kind of changes to a certain degree how the society is supposed to be. There's a theory of things, which is if you are a political, the best way to judge someone is how they treat the people they have power over. Lots of people would have heard that from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix or something like that. But it actually has a strong, cogent political message, which is, legally speaking, prisoners have no rights unless you give it to them. They basically have extenuated, they have removed themselves from the legal system. By breaking the rules of law, they have removed themselves from it. And as a result, they're technically a person and yet not a person at the same time. As a result, there are these we created the Bill of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights, the UN Court of Human Rights. These things exist because there used to be these people who, as a result of being a criminal, were just considered not people. And so we could do all kinds of things to them. Sell them into slavery, excoriate them, and mutilate them, do these horrible things to them. But it was all done in the name of protecting the majority of people.
Also, forgetting the modern concept of what prisons are. For example, the big and heady word of rehabilitation. The majority of the reasons for prisons and punishment existing had nothing to really do with rehabilitation. It was this individual or these people punished this harmed our society, and we're going to punish them back. Which is where a lot of that public embarrassment and or punishments came into effect. As if to say, hey, you did this to us, we're going to do this to you, now go about your way. As far as turning them into from public executions and punishments into prisons, you could make the claim that whatever this community is, that the public portion of it created more martyrs. It put a public face on, hey, this community is doing these harsh things to, let's say, the bread thief, right? We're going to cut the hand off of a bread thief. Well, in practice, you're going, yeah, he's a thief. You cut his hand off. When you actually see it, at some point, someone's going to look around and go, what the this is crazy. I'm watching a man's hand get cut off. I'm not going to watch this. This is horrible. So you start to move that away so you don't have to see it. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But also the classic story of the Count of Monte Cristo, you could have a prison is a great place to have a breeding ground for extreme thoughts, whether it's a criminal that becomes more extreme in their criminality. It could be prison camps, and prisons are great places to have to organize. The heroes are the rebels, and they're listen, we're going to break out, we're going to overthrow this evil empire, we're going to release the people and free them, and so they have to work together. But I'll say this for role-playing things, and this is a rule that that people should follow, but it has no guideline, and it's just this: you have got to read the room. If you're a game master and you put people in a prison, you've got to read the room. You've got to know the synergy, because it's very easy to go very heavy-handed with it and go, you have none of your equipment and you're not free. And the guards are going to, kick your ass. And after a while, the players are going to look back like, dude, this isn't fun. I thought this would be fun doing a prison escape. This is not fun at all.
Seriously, like it's just like we've been talking about in other episodes. The forums, go back and watch our other episodes of on the Creators Conclave. You'll find the playlist on my channel. Go find it. So in any case, you can, like, you have to have an understanding of like what is fun and what is interesting. We're giving the ideas. The story has to be brought up in a way that is framed adequately to people. Like one of the big ones, like that I have as a worry is like basically fear of triggering some kind of bad experience. Imprisonment, we think of it as, you did something bad, but and now you're going to be punished for it. But ultimately, it comes from a position of societal, basically like taking people away from their society, removal, exclusion, these kind of things. If you're going to start imbuing it into that, you can very easily go too far and trigger memories of people who had their families like lock them in rooms, people who had a traumatic experience in a room they couldn't leave, these kind of things. Like there's this kind of thing, there's this overriding idea of like, for men is like, feel no pain, you're not supposed to feel anything bad. Like there are people who got stuck in who've been put in lockers as a result of like bullying. They get shoved into lockers and left there for hours on end because no one knew they were there. That's a traumatic experience. And if you're going to then do a role-play experience where you're putting them in a real medieval cell, which is 3 foot by 3 foot, they can't stand up, there's no light, the only thing that they can really see is out a tiny window looking onto darkness, that could easily trigger someone. That could easily be bad. That could easily turn into not fun and go out the other side. So yet again, you got to be careful.
Ooh, Scott Poe brings up private prison systems. Now,
shite. This is where the chain comes off.
Yep. Now, there might be, that sounds like very interesting role-playing fodder, because imagine there are a number of societies where they all consider themselves to be upstanding and just, because someone or some faction has decided to, quote unquote, take their hands off of we'll remove your undesirables for you. Like we'll imprison them over here on our little island or mountain refuge or whatever, some hidden location in the swamp or whatever, and keep the undesirables away and benefiting from it to the point where maybe the society start how can we say, they create a situation in which they encourage removing more and more individuals, like the dissident idea, right? When people start speaking up about how they don't like their government, how they don't like how things are being handled, especially if they start speaking up against nobles, that's a guarantee that you're going to have one person in the corner go, hey, that individual's talking bad against you. Let's come up with some crime. Well, of course, they could always say the crime is speaking against the government, but they could also come up with like, if they don't want to be too heavy-handed, too on the nose, they could say your crime is loitering, gathering of 3 or more people in an area late at night or something, and then just come up with some crazy dumb rule, arrest them, have them sent off to this so-called private prison, and the private prison could be not only earning money from these countries that are paying them, but they could be harnessing the vast intelligence of everyone inside. Oh, you were a thief? Oh, how did you do this? Oh, you were a military individual? What tactics do they use? They could be harnessing this information and then selling it back to these other countries, only to have them create more dissidents. It's like this cycle that they've created of
like
putting
that is like one of the things that used to, like, not used to, it wasn't done in any kind of large thing, but it was actually done in certain areas of Prussia, where they would put people in certain areas, and basically the wardens would become like hedge kings, basically, because they would take all the information and start selling it back to countries where they took the dissidents from. So like there's a big historical basis of that kind of thing. And I love, like, I love the idea. I mean, I hate the concept of having private prisons nowadays. Yeah, we're not political at all. I'm not a political man at all. I'm a floof. But like in fantasy worlds, in kind of like this kind of sci-fi worlds where corporatocracy has become big deals, private prisons are kind of the big thing. Basically, like in medieval times, you know, in the olden days, slavery was not so much like something that the country would have, as individuals would be able to tithe away slaves to the country. So basically, the king had loads of slaves. Yeah. The country had no slaves. The king had loads of slaves. It was a private resource that they would have and they would give out to the different people. But because there was this overlap and stuff like that, it's cool. But basically, we're basically talking about private slaves. We're talking about private labor. Being a prisoner could very quickly turn into making shields, making swords, doing the things that are undesirable and needing of things, clearing out sewers, fighting gelatinous cubes. That is the worst thing an adventurer can do. They have to fight gelatinous cubes. Here you go. Use your fists. Hopefully, you'll feed it to death.
You know, the idea of the prison having like being a source of labor was something I was going to bring up as well. That these various communities would use them, and then of course the prisons are not great. That's not the right word. They can breed behaviors that otherwise don't fit into what would be considered civilized society, right? There are very many great television shows that deal with the dichotomy between living in one place or the other. There was one called Oz. There was a show called Oz, and how you have to use one set of skills to live in so-called civilized society and another set of skills to live in the prison society. And it's possible that the player characters may find out in some ways that the so-called civilized society, that when they become imprisoned, that the way things are done there, it would be a great way to flip it where, wait a minute, things are actually far more, they're done with merit and more civilized in the prison than it would be outside the prison, right? You could have like this situation where you could have the player characters do not realize that the people in the prison, the prison staff is upset not because they are acting wild or something, but they're becoming too organized. They are learning too many things to fight against the system and whatnot. It could be a possibility that when using using the prison or the prison escape or being imprisoned or something, that although the players want to get out, there might be things that they're going to learn while they're in there that leaves little seeds for that when they escape. They're like, oh man, we didn't know this other faction was imprisoned with us. When we escape, that's a great place for us to go to find refuge or something of that nature.
Yeah, like that's kind of the thing. Prisons seemingly like what we're getting at right here is that prisons are an enclosed ecosystem which is separate from the rest of society. So you have a lot of leeway to build it into what you would be interested in doing. I mean, we've got a lot of people here talking about, hypothetically, prisons would just be as a like concept of trauma. Prison would have to be a like prison is just going to be like a source of trauma and damage and stuff like that. You know, it like sadly we've devolved into the concept of triggering, and that's bollocks. But okay. But you know, still to the thing of we still got the thing of, you know, because prisons are separate, we are able to kind of separate it out, and we can actually make it into a little microcosm even. I mean, that's actually a pretty cool idea. If you set things up in a, like going back to just the idea of role-playing, if you have a starting thing of escape from prison, you could literally have a cross-section of every social strata of society in a prison, because they're all there because they broke the law. That's kind of the unifying thing about them. There's not really anything else. Talking about concentration camps, gulags, and those kind of things, that's adding more to it. But if you just straight up had, this is a prison.
Hey. Oh, he froze. It might be signals. A version of a prison that is very popular today, I'm going to bring up, is the one in Game of Thrones, and that would be the prison on the wall. I would say the those who take the black, the individuals that are that have to take the black, that are taken to the wall to defend the wall against the White Walkers on the other side, is this idea that they can't leave. There are basically criminals that are up there, but their job, they're also armed and such, and they have to live together and perform this other job and such. I didn't want to devolve into talking about whether I can't speak for someone else, whether someone can be triggered or not or whatever. You can't really speak on someone else's behalf. I do say that role-playing games are a great way to hash out some of your feelings and things. But the idea that a version of a prison could be one that, like a prison that moves, or the prison is in a different location. So it's talking about the wall in Game of Thrones. That could very well be considered a prison. You are punished. You're sent to the wall. You're there with other criminals. You have a mission, which is defend the wall. But there's also these machinations going on amongst all the people that are there. Everyone supposedly takes an oath that everyone seems to ignore at some point in their careers. You know, and originally they were considered honorable people. Hey, I'm going to go defend the wall. And then it eventually turned into this, like, you know, punishment kind of thing. Mind you, I've never read the books. I just seen the show. But my point is that is a type of prison, as well as you could almost consider pirate ships to be a kind of a mobile prison, especially if you were destitute or punished. You know, you have two options. We can throw you in that big block of a prison we have on the hill, or we can send you on these sailing ships and go fight our enemies, or be a privateer and, you know, piratize our other enemies or something. And you're going, one or the other. I'll go out in the ocean. Hell, I'm not going to stay around here.
Yeah, I mean, like, you get better food, you know, because you need to be fed because you're doing work if you're a sailor. I mean, that, like, the idea of conscription, the idea of like conscript armies and things like that, that's everywhere. That's just a brilliant idea in general. Just the idea of, especially if you're playing games where your characters are specifically kind of like combat specialists, conscript army. Really, really good way of bringing them together. You just say, conscript army, you guys are all in the same squad. Boom, go. Have fun.
Yep. And like Gnu brought up, like, hey boy, you ever want to be a pirate? Too bad, you're coming with us. Bonk. I mean, yeah, conscript armies where they just go, we need 20 able-bodied individuals. You grab that person running away. You're coming with us, and you're just gone. you could very well have like the prison, and you brought up the point of having every social strata. You could be fighting side by side with like nobles and killers and enemies of the state, and just maybe someone just looked at their loved one the wrong way, and the neighbor, the neighbor gets sent off to prison because you looked inside their house or something. I mean, you could have all kinds of like minor crimes to major crimes individuals all mixed together, and having that dichotomy as well. Like, hey, all I did is steal bread. And the other person's like, hey, I killed like 40 something people. I don't remember, and putting them all together. As a side note, Benjamin Franklin created a prison in my hometown, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The prison still's there. They have filmed movies there, and he decided to create the most humane prison. Mm-hmm. It was shut down because it did such psychological trauma to the people there. Essentially, what he created was a spoked prison where every room had an outdoor area. Each prisoner was separated from the other prisoners by walls, so you couldn't speak to anyone. And every other gate would open so you could go outside and have like a little garden. You had books and stuff, and he fed you. The idea was that you would be in solitary confinement. There would be no one was going to be there to harm you. No one would like beat you or anything. You would just be imprisoned, solitary confinement for whatever length of time, whether it's for life or whatever, and you would live your life out by your lonesome. The problem was that was more harsh than putting all the prisoners together in the threat of being beaten or stabbed or whatever in a prison.
The moment you said solitary confinement, I was immediately like, oh yeah, I wonder why it was bad.
Yeah, it was
like just the idea. It's just the idea of like they can't leave. Ever.
Yeah. As brilliant as Benjamin Franklin's opium-induced designs were, that was one of his worst ones, where he was very much like, hey, let's just be humane to each other. And it was like, dude, they even back then they considered it to be an inhumane punishment. So it's very, 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 very interesting to have like the prison idea. Now, of course, you can also have a prison escape. And this is the very simple one where like, oh, all you guys are in prison. There's also a key nearby, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and a box with all your stuff in it, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And then the players, what happens is they easily escape, and then that becomes the game itself. Like, oh, we just spend one session to escape. We get our stuff. We put all our magic items on because for some reason nobody bothered going through our stuff. We pull out the box, we get our things on, we run, and then the rest of the escape is just being hunted down. The authorities are after you. You've been accused of a crime. There are people in the prison maybe that have escaped with you, or there's people left in the prison that once they get out, now they're upset at you for not taking them with you. Those kind of things. So it can also, maybe the prison itself isn't the game, but it's all the things.
It's the kindling. Yeah.
Right.
Something else to also think about is why you would want to escape. Because I mean, we've been bringing up. Like, hear me out. Prisons be shit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not gonna disagree with anybody who says that. Yeah. But there's also just this thing of, Oz, for instance, the Shawshank Redemption. One of the big things about one of the through fares that link these two kinds of stories is actually the difficulty of reacclimating for people who have spent large amount of time in prison and then left. Similarly, you need a reason to run away from a government's worth of people hunting you. So that cost benefit analysis has to be pretty good. One of like a thing that I wrote ages and ages ago. It was basically like a fan fiction, and then I made it into a character that I kind of used. Was a mage who was a prisoner. Like the original fan fiction was based in the Dragon Age universe, Thedas and stuff. So mages are generally kept in a prison. Generally, they're kept in a circle. And the setup was that it was a circle mage who was escaping. He ran away. They ran away. And they specifically tried to make it so that they couldn't be found. And like, no. The setup was that they were okay with people finding them. They didn't like try to destroy their phylacteries or anything like that. They didn't do anything to thing. And they were just getting hunted continuously. And the story was literally just these two people hunting each other through the whole of Thedas. And that was the story. And the question is, why would you do that? Why would you run? There is, of course, the very easy thing of prisoners be shit dough. So, getting the crap beat out of you every day is not a nice thing to do for anybody. But then there's just the thing of like, well, what is the subject matter of what you're leaving the prison for? That's a good bit of drama. That's good stuff. It could be you're trying to defend somebody. It could be that you're trying to usurp a kingdom. It could be that this is all part of a long game in order to get somebody out of prison. It could be what that character that I created was, which was literally in Thedas. There is this point. It's called the Riddermark, which is right at the top of the map, and they say nobody has been able to go further than this point. And this character was literally, I want to go further than that point. That was all they wanted to do. Once in their life, they wanted to do it without being imprisoned. They wanted to just go further than anybody else has ever gone before. And like that's kind of the setup for that. That was a very, very evocative, kind of very philosophical reason to leave. This idea of freedom, true freedom away from everybody. But it could go elsewhere. It could go in different directions.
Yeah, there's the chat brings up a bunch of things like Suicide Squad is a perfect example of like being able to walk around, but you're still imprisoned.
Yeah.
If you're being, especially sci-fi, that's perfect for a sci-fi setting where you're being tracked the entire time. Maybe your behavior is, shall we say, like modified. So if you're a criminal and you try to steal something, maybe you get an electric shock every time you try to commit a crime, as opposed to going on these particular missions or something for the government or a corporation or whatever. GNU also brings up the fact that prisons is not just for crimes of people filled with people who blaspheme the god. You could have a community where they're imprisoning druids. They're pagans, and we don't want pagans. You're to worship the god of light, and if you don't worship the god of light, it's not a matter of you worshiping evil gods. It could be if you worship something else, therefore you are criminalized. Your behavior, your beliefs are criminalized.
Like there's also other, like we could even go even more specific than that, which is sectarian violence. It's not that you worship a different god, it's that you worship them on different days. It's that you have different religious things. Like religion is a big old thing that lots of people have gone to prison. Lots of people have died over religion. So we could also talk about, on a political level, you have different political beliefs. You don't believe in the monarchical system. You're a Republican. Well, why you want that? The gods chose the king. Stop being a dick. Here, drink all this gold. Like people used to do that. They used to give people like gold-plated teeth and shit like that. Like you used to boil gold and pour it down their throat because they were a Republican. It's that kind of crazy, that kind of stuff that people would do. It goes back to the thing we were talking about before, which was people who are seen to commit crimes are not seen as beholden to the protections that society gives. And as a result, you can really talk a lot about any culture at all by depicting how they treat criminals, how they treat people who are outside of the standard. Now, I believe that we are running in on our running up the clock in our time. I believe, yeah. How do you feel about like moving on or wrapping up? Like, how do you feel about things, my dear and lovely friends?
let's start to wrap it up because we we didn't get the 40K. We didn't get the
Oh
digital
god, shit! I
tools.
forgot about that.
Yeah, we
We
were
didn't
going to
talk
do all
about
that stuff. It'll just go on because I mean, shit,
We'll
dude.
just talk. We'll just talk forever.
I,
Meanwhile, my partner is getting ready for like moving house. We're moving house this in like 2 weeks, in like a week, and then we're moving again in another week, and we're packing up. And I'm just kind of sitting here going, "Oh, this is fun. I'm having lots of fun." In the background, she's just sitting there going, "Dick, why are you making me pack this shit up? Stop it! Come here and be useful." Yeah.
That's funny. Just to wrap it up, prisons can also are not limited to just like the pain and punishment and having to punish the players and all that kind of stuff. It could be a recruiting tool. Maybe there's a community that uses it to find the most noble individuals. So it could be like it's a farce of sorts. Like, we're going to imprison you, look at your behavior, and if you still hold on to your humanity, we're going to recruit you for bigger and better things. Also, many people fall into a particular religion in prison, and it could be that the prison becomes a place where a god or gods or type of religion is fostered in the prison, so that the maybe the players are all playing. I'm just making example, like the players are all playing druids or woodland type characters. Maybe they received that teaching in prison after being imprisoned for various things. So like one was a thief, one stole bread, one vandalized a wall, one had a barroom fight. They thrown into prison, and then they fall into like a religious standard, and one of them becomes a ranger, one becomes a druid, one of them becomes gets some kind of like woodland warlock patron or something. And then when they escape or they're released or something, they become closer with the outer community as opposed to the community that they came from or something. So it could be a clearinghouse of sorts as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, like similarly, it's like narratively speaking, we didn't speak about it properly, but the bringing of different cross sections of society into one area makes for a very, very good melting pot. So yeah, that's a good thing.
Yep. Our RP kind of ends it with prisons aren't just buildings. Anything that forces you to live a certain way or follow strict rules can be seen as a prison by people as well. As spoken by anybody that lives under extreme totalitarianism or dictatorship, would absolutely feel that, or you could say that the walls are social and psychological more than physical. And although they might stretch 500 miles away from you, they're still walls. So it could be, there's an old, I want to say an old late 80s movie or something where alien drones or something roamed around the city, and you had to act in a particular way, otherwise you would get arrested. And you could do this for sci-fi, where your behavior is monitored, and if you act out of sorts, the computer system or the AI or the overlords might say, you're not being happy today. What's wrong? Do we need to correct you? And you're like, no, I'm happy. And you're like, you put on this forced smile as you come out the house, and you greet everyone in nice, peaceful ways, but really inside you're just like you're chomping at the bit to just want to be able to scream and yell and do whatever you want. And a real prison sometimes isn't even. It's like you don't dislike what they're telling you what to do. You just dislike being told what to do.
Yeah.
So you could have a community where, under threat of physical violence, you're to be nice to your neighbor. Well, you're like, well, there's nothing wrong with being nice with my neighbor, but don't hold a gun to my head to tell me to do it. Let me decide to be nice to my neighbor or not. I want the freedom to choose to be nice to my neighbor. If you pulled a gun to my head, now you're just forcing me to smile. You're forcing me to say, to have nice things to say. those kind of things. So that could be very insidious as well.
Like really what was it? 1984. The Department of Corrections. They take, I think his name was Winston Churchill, I think. Yeah, I think it was. The main character, they take him into the thing, and it's got nothing, like, what they do to him is like mentally degrading. It destroys them on a psychological level, but it's absolutely kind of this weird, banal thing. What they do is that they put 5 lights behind the interrogator, and it just shines in them. And the interrogator says, "How many lights are in behind me?" And he just kind of goes, 4. Zap. No, he says 5 or something, and he goes, zap. And he goes, "There are 2 lights behind me." And that's it. It's not even that you disagree with them. It's just the fact that they are so imposing on, they're trying to impose on you that kind of right. And I mean, that kind of, like, we could bring in Dragon Grin at that point. It's like, yo, nothing's too bad about the dismembered lord, except for, all the dead people. But, nothing's too bad about all the dismembered lords. You might not disagree with them too much, but, you better not say anything bad about him.
Yeah. What was it? Patrick Stewart, Star Trek.
Oh God, yeah. When he was in, like, he was basically in that 1984 bit, where he was being tortured by Romulans and stuff.
Yep. Logan's Run. That's another one. Everyone dies at 30 or something, 25 or 30 or whatever.
30,
yeah,
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we live in a peaceful society, except for your lifespan. It's like, what? I don't want to do that. So
I live to see 40, mate.
Yep. So yeah, we could come up with a ton more ideas.
We're gonna go on forever.
Yeah. So I'll start to end it, and then I'll let you wrap it up at the end. So for I don't know who wouldn't know who I am. For those who watch this and aren't in the chat, who don't know who I am DBJ. My channel is RPG with DBJ. Dave and Jackson. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. My little brainchild, my little baby, is the cinematic environs. All that stuff. I will put it down in the doobly-doo or whatever it's called below the video and give it a title. So there will be some information there. But yeah, on Drive Through RPG. Check me out on G+, although I don't. It's kind of small community there. There is a Discord channel. Man, there's kind of thing. Oh, don't bring up Gattaca because I love that movie. Oh, that movie. So
guys, I think the best way to deal with this is we will not look at the fucking chat from now on, because I'm sitting there going, "Oh, I want to talk about that."
I know.
Let's talk about Exile. Let's talk about Exile.
Jesus, right? Like, man, it's a great idea. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So, but to continue, I do a live stream 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. I call it demi-daily because there will be times when I won't be able to do it. But apparently I'm so addicted that it goes well over an hour. It was a vlog cast where we just bring up a subject and we just go on. It's basically 5 days of world building. Each day is a different subject. So there's like Monster Mondays, Tips and Tricks Tuesdays, World Building Wednesdays, my passion, Third Pillar Thursdays, where I love talking about using that third pillar of gaming, the environment, and then lastly, Future Fridays. But as always, I just like to have fun and just talk with you guys and such. And please, Lath, please plug yourself, and don't forget to talk about Legats as well.
Okay, so I am Lath, also known as Darius Jonah. Darius Jonah is my... What the fuck are you talking about? What? We're... God, guys, stop it!
I know they're bringing up these movies that are just like by themselves. Okay. Dude, so what are they doing?
I am a partner. I am one of the owning partners of Power Up Gamers. Our tagline is role players for accessibility. Basically, we're all about helping people who have visible and non-visible learning disabilities or difficulties in order to play. This isn't just talking about, you know, people with like social disorders or something like that, like autism or so on and so forth. We're also talking about people who have sight impairment, hearing impairment, speech impediments, these kind of things. They are very interested in these kind of things, but they don't happen to have that many resources for it. So we're working with the BOTS system, which creates Braille dice, printing things in Braille, so that way people who have sight impairment can kind of read. We are working on audiovisual stuff, so that way we can include all the senses. We give out advice, like all the books that we've produced have the idea of like giving people a large amount of information, but in multiple different ways, so that way you can tailor make things for the people you want. So at the moment, we have produced one book, Lagarte's Tome of Amazing Creatures, Volume 1. We just finished, like 2 days ago. Oh, there we go. That's Lagarde 1. Lagarde, there is Tome 2, which is a Kickstarter that just finished, like literally 2 days ago or so. We finished with a good, like really, really well. I'm really, really happy with that. And we're in the process of getting the first volumes out to everybody who's not, you know, everybody who's kind of getting it in various and sundry different ways. RP Gamer in the chat is one of the people who is in the company as well as Jaren D&D, our, you know, Grand Lord and Savior. He's a good dude. Now, I also own a YouTube channel, which is Darius Jonna, which I never put anything on, but I like to kind of, it's kind of a way for me to communicate with people because I like send via Messenger and stuff like that. Generally speaking, I am around and posting things and doing different stuff like that. Same as Dave, Monday to Friday. I post general things which are specifically designed towards more of the design aspect of gaming. So this is when I kind of talk about, here's this idea, here's this idea, here's this idea. Monday to Friday, I generally do here is how you would make an NPC of a prison guard. Here is how you would mechanically show, like, how a prison would psychologically affect somebody. It just depends on what I do. I just do it very, very quickly in very, very short amounts. Most of the time I do it on Twitter. If you guys want to, you go on my Twitter, you'll find me doing this stuff. All cases, that's me. Thank you very much, Dave, for having me along. And our next time we're going to be on, it'll be in 2 weeks. It'll be on my channel. Hopefully, I will have both moved into a new house and have set up by that point. So hopefully it will be on my channel. And thank you all very much. Goodbye.
All right. And we are out.